Okay, so today we're diving into a topic that's kind of unnerving when you think about it. We're talking about potential assassination attempts on a former U.S. president. And I say attempts because we're not just looking at one incident, but a series of security breaches that have targeted former President Trump.
Right, and these aren't just like internet threats or rumors. We're talking about real incidents with real consequences.
Exactly, and the details are pretty unsettling. We'll be looking at a recent report from Al Jazeera and some news agencies that detail 3 separate incidents. Some you might have heard about, others maybe not, but when you piece them all together,
It definitely raises some serious questions about the state of security around high-profile figures.
for sure. So are you ready to dive in?
Absolutely, let's do it.
All right, let's start with something that might seem almost mundane at first. Imagine a sunny day in California. A Trump rally in Coachella is in full swing. Supporters of Secret Service, the whole 9 yards. And then a man named Them Miller, who claims to be a Trump supporter, is arrested near the rally. Now, you might think, okay, probably just an overzealous fan got a little too close, right?
Yeah, seems pretty straightforward at first glance.
But here's where it takes a turn. This wasn't just a fan getting too close. Miller was caught with unregistered firearms. And get this, he had multiple passports with different names.
Whoa, wait a minute, multiple passports?
You got it like something out of a spy movie?
That definitely changes things. It's not just about being a fan anymore. That sounds a lot more serious.
And to make matters even more unsettling, the Riverside County Sheriff Chad Bianco didn't mince words.
Yeah.
He actually said, and I quote, "I probably did have deputies that prevented the 3rd assassination attempt." That's not something a law enforcement official says lightly.
No, that's a huge statement, and it really makes you wonder if Miller was a Trump supporter, as he claimed. Why all the secrecy? Why the fake passports and unregistered weapons? What was he really planning?
Exactly. It's that dissonance between someone's stated beliefs and their actions that really stands out in these cases.
Absolutely, and it makes you question whether some individuals claiming to support a political figure might actually pose a bigger threat than we realize.
Right, it muddies the waters on motivations for sure. And that leads us to our second incident, this time in Florida. At a golf course of all places, a man named Ryan Ruth was charged with attempting to assassinate Trump.
Okay, so in this case, we're not talking about just security breaches or suspicious activity, but an actual charge of attempted assassination.
Exactly, and here's where the legal distinctions get interesting. Unlike the first case with Miller, where he was hit with gun charges but not outright attempted assassination, authorities directly charged Ruth with trying to, well, take down the former president.
So why the different legal approach? Why were the charges different in these 2 cases?
It likely boils down to the evidence in each case. We don't know all the specifics of the investigations, but it suggests authorities had much stronger grounds to pursue attempted assassination charges against Ruth. Perhaps they had more concrete evidence of his intent to harm, or maybe there was proof of planning involved.
That makes sense. You'd need a higher burden of proof for such a serious charge.
And just to be clear, Ruth has pleaded not guilty, and this is still an ongoing investigation. But the fact that he was charged with attempted assassination speaks volumes.
Absolutely. It highlights just how seriously authorities are taking these incidents and how real the danger is even after a president leaves office.
It really is a different world when you think about it. The level of security needed for these figures doesn't just disappear overnight.
You're telling me, and it makes you think what other potential threats are out there that we don't even know about.
That's a chilling thought, and it leads us to the incident. I'm sure you all remember the one that really shook a lot of people. The shooting at the Trump rally in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, that one was hard to forget.
And this wasn't just a threat or a close call. This was a direct attack. A gunman actually opened fire, and the former president was shot in the ear.
It's chilling to think about, and in the aftermath, there was a wave of criticism. Tons of questions about security protocols. And to their credit, the U.S. Secret Service actually admitted to failures in their planning and coordination.
And those admissions are crucial because they point to systemic issues. These weren't just individual oversights. These are cracks in the system. They could lead to even more serious consequences if they aren't addressed.
So what needs to change? How do we prevent something like this from happening again?
That's the million-dollar question, right? And unfortunately, there's no easy answer. But these incidents force us to confront some uncomfortable truths about the world we live in, a world where political polarization seems to be growing, and the potential for violence against public figures is a very real threat.
It's a lot to process, for sure. But before we get too far down that road, I think it helps to zoom out for a second. We've looked closely at 3 separate incidents, but what connects them? Are there common threads that stand out to you?
Absolutely. For one, there's the obvious security breaches, whether it's lax protocols, miscommunication, or a failure to fully grasp the potential threat. These incidents show there are weaknesses in how we protect these high-profile individuals.
And we can't forget about the consistent presence of firearms in these situations.
Right? It's a stark reminder of just how easy it is to get a hold of weapons in this country and what can happen when those weapons end up in the wrong hands.
And the most unsettling commonality. In all three cases, the target was a former president.
Which tells us that the anger and animosity, the potential for violence, it doesn't just disappear when someone leaves office. It makes you think about how we protect these figures even after their terms are over.
It's like there's this undercurrent of tension, this potential for violence simmering beneath the surface.
Exactly, and it is important to remember these aren't just isolated events. They're symptoms of something much larger, a climate where political discourse has become increasingly aggressive and violence is seen as a legitimate way to express discontent.
Which leads to a very important question. What do these incidents say about the current political climate? Are we seeing a dangerous pattern of escalating violence in politics?
It is a big question for sure.
It is, and it's easy to get caught up in all the what-ifs and start fearing the worst-case scenarios. But we need to remember that these incidents, while concerning, don't necessarily mean we're headed for complete chaos.
It's a good point.
Yeah.
It's all about finding that balance,
Yeah.
Recognizing the risks without giving in to sensationalism. We need to stay informed but not live in fear.
Exactly. Vigilance, not panic.
Okay, so how do we do that? How do we protect free speech and the right to assemble while also ensuring the safety of public figures, especially in a world that feels increasingly divided?
That is the million-dollar question. It's such a delicate balance, and there are no easy answers. I mean, we need open dialogue, but we also need to hold people accountable when they incite violence. And we have to strengthen security measures without turning our public spaces into fortresses.
It's tough, right? Like, how do you find that sweet spot where freedom and security can coexist?
Exactly, and it's not just on law enforcement or security agencies either. It takes all of us being vigilant, reporting anything that seems suspicious, and fostering a culture of respect and understanding, even when we disagree strongly with someone.
It's about recognizing that words have power, and unchecked aggression can have real and devastating consequences.
Precisely, and I think it's also important to remember that while these particular incidents involved former President Trump, the implications extend far beyond any one individual.
Oh, absolutely.
Because when the safety of one person is threatened, it impacts everyone's sense of security.
It really does make you think about the kind of world we're creating and what kind of legacy we want to leave behind.
It does, and it leaves us with a final, perhaps unsettling thought. How do we move forward in a way that upholds our democratic values while also acknowledging the very real threats to those values?
It's a question that needs our attention, even if there are no easy answers. It really is a question we all need to grapple with.
It is, and it's not about living in fear or giving up on those values, but rather recognizing that protecting them requires constant vigilance and a commitment to finding solutions.
Absolutely, and I think part of that is understanding that there's no one-size-fits-all solution. It's going to take a multifaceted approach to address such a complex issue.
Right. It's about looking at things from multiple angles.
Yeah.
Strengthening security measures, yes,
Yeah.
but also addressing the root causes of this kind of anger and extremism.
Exactly, because at the end of the day, it's not just about protecting individuals. It's about protecting our democracy as a whole.
I couldn't agree more. And that means fostering a culture of civil discourse where we can disagree respectfully without resorting to violence or threats.
And that's a responsibility that falls on all of us, not just politicians or law enforcement.
Absolutely. It's about each of us examining our own biases and being mindful of how our words and actions contribute to the overall climate.
It's about choosing dialogue over division and understanding over anger.
Well said. I think that's a good note to end on.
It really is. So to our listeners, we challenge you to think critically about these issues, engage in constructive conversations, and be part of the solution. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into a topic that's as important as it is unsettling. Until next time, stay informed, stay engaged, and stay safe.